soup day. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. This one's for you, Julio.
Here are all of the ingredients we're gonna need. Frozen peas, fresh petite carrots, celery, you can see the pasta, and I got this chicken on sale for $5. And you need a nice big stock pot. I've put the chicken, which is already cooked, it's one of those rotisserie chickens, into the pot, and I put it in there upside down with about an inch of water over it, and it's on high so it'll boil. And I'll let that boil for about an hour, maybe a little less, and then I'll remove the chicken so I can take all the meat off of it. This is how you make a good chicken stock for your soup base. These are the things that you'll be adding to your broth once the chicken has been removed and the broth is bone free. So, you see turmeric, smoked paprika, thyme, roasted garlic powder, and onion powder. And it's about a teaspoon-ish of each. Not a lot. Do it to taste. And then salt, about 2 tablespoons. Start with 1, taste it, and then add the rest as you deem fit. Okay, you'll notice that the water has become a little bit more cloudy and chickeny. I've actually added extra water in there to bring it all the way up to the top for additional broth. It is now time to remove the chicken. I'm going to use these lovely silicone mitts. The great thing about these is that they are waterproof and heat proof. So when I pull the chicken out, after I turn off the heat, I can use these to assist me with that, and then it can cool and I can put the meat back into the broth as I strip the carcass. As you can see, the carcass has been completely stripped of meat. I used just a regular pair of kitchen gloves, just like that, to help me with the heat and make sure that I was able to get all of the meat off the chicken as I put it back into the pot. You can see there's a lot of meat in here. Let me just pull up that. And I've left it in pretty big chunks because as you heat this and eat it, it'll start to break apart even more. It'll be very tender. Now, I'm going to take the turmeric and add that. Turmeric adds a little bit of that color, but it also adds a little bit of that kind of country flavor to it. So here's my turmeric. I'm not gonna put in a whole bunch. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. So probably a little less than a teaspoon, but don't put more than that in that. That's like a 1.5 gallons of broth in there. So you don't really want to, it doesn't take a lot. So there's some turmeric. I'm using smoked paprika. It's one of my favorite ingredients, mainly because it gives it that kind of oven-baked, roasted flavor. And you can be pretty generous with this. As you can see, I'm putting it in there. And I'm putting it in the same amount, maybe a half more. Just gonna let it get in there. And then thyme. Now thyme is a really fragrant herb, so I don't like to put in too much, otherwise it just tastes too herby. But you do want at least a half a teaspoon in there. I'll probably get more like about a teaspoon. That's about good. That gives you a sense of what the proportions look like as you put them into the pot. I like to use roasted powdered garlic. And the thing is there's no salt in it, and I only use a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. I'm gonna taste it in a minute. And then onion powder. And I use onion powder just because it kind of rounds out, brings it all together without actually having to put onions in there. If I were going to put onions in there, I would caramelize them first and then put them in because they become too strong and overpowering. And what we want is like a nice set of flavors that blends together that you can't quite figure out what ingredient is what. Now I'm going to put the salt in. This broth has no salt in it, so I'm gonna be generous. That's at least a tablespoon right there. And then all you have to do is stir it up. And I'm gonna taste it. Needs just a tad more salt. So maybe another half a teaspoon or so. And I'm using sea salt, just natural sea salt, because that has nice high flavor. You don't have to use as much. There we go. Gonna taste it again. And it's done. I have sliced the celery and have put in the petite baby carrots to saute them before adding them to the broth. The petite baby carrots are great because you don't have to slice them or anything, and they're narrow enough, you know, they're thin enough to cook. I put them in first and let them cook for a few minutes before adding the celery, and I'm going to put a little tiny bit of salt in there, not a lot, just a half teaspoon or so. And Julio, I saved that special prize to make a special wish for you. All right, so I've made the noodles, and what I did is I put them, I left them in the pot, I drained them, and that was all great and everything. And you don't want to put them in the broth, because if you do that, they just keep absorbing water. And these are the protein enhanced ones, so it's okay to a certain extent. But the thing is that you don't really want them to get all soggy and nasty in the broth. So always keep the noodles separate and then serve the broth over when you're ready to eat. So what I do is I'll get a little bit of the broth. You see how that's got like some chicken, and we've got the vegetables in there, and you just kind of, put in there what you think is going to work. Spilled a little bit there, but we've got more broth and some more chicken, and it makes a really hearty meal. And I've made enough broth so that you can actually put your chicken and your vegetables in there, and then put the broth in there afterwards on top of the noodles, so that you have a nice soup base there. So I'll just do a little bit of a serving there, and you just put it in there as much as you would like to have, to what your preferences are. And there you have it, homemade chicken noodle soup. See you next time.